Good morning, everybody, and welcome to First Chapter Friday. You made it. So, the book we're going to read today is called The Pact. And this book was written, it's nonfiction, it's written by three doctors who grew up and beat the odds, and they made a pact, hence the title, to become doctors, and they helped each other through some struggles. So let's go ahead and let's get started. This book is available and actively learned. So if you are interested and you want to continue, please make sure to ask your ELA teacher and they will hook you up. All right, here we go. Introduction. We treat them in our hospitals every day. They are young brothers, often drug dealers, gang members, or small-time criminals who show up shot, stabbed, or beaten after a hustle gone bad. To some of our medical colleagues, they are just nameless thugs, perpetuating crime and death in neighborhoods that have seen far too much of those things. But when we look into their faces, we see ourselves as teenagers. We see our friends. We see what we easily could have become as young adults. And we're reminded of the thin line that separates us. Three 29-year-old doctors, an emergency room physician, an internist, and a dentist, from these patients whose lives are filled with danger and desperation. We grew up in poor, broken homes in New Jersey neighborhoods riddled with crime, drugs, and death, and came of age in the 1980s at the height of a crack epidemic that ravaged communities like ours throughout the nation. There were no doctors or lawyers walking the streets of our communities. Where we lived, hustlers reigned, and it was easy to follow their example. Two of us landed in juvenile detention centers before our 18th birthdays, but inspired early by caring and imaginative role models. One of us in childhood latched onto a dream of becoming a dentist, steered clear of trouble, and in his senior year of high school persuaded his two best friends to apply to a college program for minority students interested in becoming doctors. We knew we'd never survive if we went after it alone, and so we made a pact. We'd help one another through, no matter what. In college, the three of us stuck together to survive and thrive in a world that was different from anything we had ever known. We provided one another with a kind of positive peer pressure. From the moment we made our pact, the competition was on. When one of us finished his college application, the other two rushed to send theirs out. When we participated in a 6-week remedial program at Seton Hall University the summer before our freshman year, each of us felt pressured to perform well because we knew our friends would excel and we didn't want to embarrass ourselves or lag behind. When one of us made an A on a test, the others strived to make A's too. We studied together. We worked summer jobs together. We partied together. And we learned to solve our problems together. We are doctors today because of the positive influences that we had on one another. The lives of most impressionable young people are defined by their friends, whether they are Black, white, Hispanic, or Asian, whether they are rich, poor, or middle class, whether they live in the city, the suburbs, or the country. Among boys, particularly, there seems to be some macho code that says to gain respect, you have to prove that you're bad. We know firsthand that the wrong friends can lead you into trouble. But even more, they can tear down hopes, dreams, and possibilities. We know, too, that the right friends inspire you, pull you through, rise with you. Each of us experienced friendships that could have destroyed our lives. We suspect that many of the young brothers we treat every day in our hospitals are entangled in such friendships. Friendships that require them to prove their toughness and manhood daily, even at the risk of losing their own lives. The three of us were blessed. We found in one another a friendship that works in a powerful way, a friendship that helped three vulnerable boys grow into successful men, a friendship that ultimately helped save our lives. But it wasn't always easy. There were times when one of us was ready to give up, and times when we made bad decisions. Some of that is ugly and difficult to admit, and we suffered pain and other consequences. But we have laid it all out here nonetheless. We did this because we hope that our story will inspire others. so that even those young people who feel trapped by their circumstances or pulled by peer pressure in the wrong directions might look for a way out, not through drugs, alcohol, crime, or dares, but through the power of friendship. And within our story are many others of mentors, friends, relatives, and even strangers we met along the way, whose goodwill and good deeds made a difference in our lives. We hope our story will also demonstrate that anyone with enough compassion has the power to transform and redirect someone else's troubled life. If we have succeeded at all in helping to turn even a single life around, or in opening a window of hope, then this book was well worth our effort. All right, lots of great things to think about here, right? Like, think about your own friends. And are they positive influences on your life? Are you a positive influence on the lives of others? And then also you might think about, well, who are your role models? Who are the people who have believed in you no matter what, or who have pushed you or given you some kind of hope or gift on your journey? So just some things to think about. Let's take a little look-see. The next chapter. All right, chapter 1, Dreaming Big. George. My eyes followed the dentist's gloved hands from the silver tray next to my chair to my wide open mouth. What's that for? I asked, pointing at the funny-looking pliers he was holding. At 11, I sported a set of seriously crooked teeth, and my mother had taken me to the University of Medicine and Dentistry in Newark to get braces that we hoped would improve my smile. My curiosity must have impressed the dentist, because he not only explained his tools and how he planned to use them, he also taught me the names and number of teeth and how to count and classify them. A few minutes later, he quizzed me to see how much I remembered. Our little game left me so excited that I could hardly wait for my next appointment. That was when I began thinking about becoming a dentist someday. I don't remember the dentist's name, but I never forgot what he did for me. He gave me a dream, and there was no greater gift for a smart kid growing up in a place where dreams were snatched away all the time. I spent the first 7 years of my life in apartment 5G of the Stella Wright housing projects with my mother and older brother. Our building was a graffiti-covered 13-story high-rise with elevators that smelled like urine and sometimes didn't work. Like public housing projects in major cities across the country, the Stella Wright development was massive. 16 high-rises stretched over 2 blocks. They were packed with hundreds of poor families like mine, mostly mothers and children, few fathers in sight. My favorite place was the playground, but like so many structures around the development, it stayed in disrepair. My friends and I were constantly climbing, jumping, and swinging on broken down equipment that daily threatened our lives. One day when I was 5, I was playing on the wooden jungle gym and tried to skip over a missing plank to get to the sliding board. My jump was short and I missed. My small body slipped through the gap and slammed to the ground below. The impact knocked me unconscious. My brother Garland, just 6.5 then, rushed over, slapped my face over and over again, and tried to scoop my body up in his arms, thinking I was dead. Blood gushed from the back of my head. He screamed for our mother. Our mother, Ella Jenkins Mack, has always been the dominant figure in my life. I was just a toddler when she and my father, George Jenkins Sr., divorced. When I was 2, we moved from South Carolina, where I was born, to Newark. I rarely saw my father after that. He came around a few times while I was in high school, sent $500 or so for toys at Christmas, and attended my graduations. But we never spent the kind of time together that builds a relationship. As soon as my mother, my brother, and I moved to the projects in a building on Muhammad Ali Avenue, my mom started working to get us out. She was a proud woman, and she didn't like living in public housing. She wanted to make it on her own. Raised on a farm with 8 brothers and sisters in Warrenton, South Carolina, she had been taught to fend for herself. She developed a toughness that at times made her seem emotionless, but her determination and consistency stabilized our lives. I never saw life break her down. If she struggled to pay the bills, and I know there must have been times when she did, her children never saw it. When Garland and I did well, she praised us without gushing. and we knew better than to expect a reward for doing what we were expected to do, like cleaning our room or making a good grade on a report card. Mom began working as a financial customer service representative for Chubb Insurance Company in 1978 and still works there today. By the time I was 7, she had saved enough for us to move out of the projects. We moved a block away to High Park Gardens, a private complex with landscaped gardens, grass, and a few trees. The complex operated like a co-op. Each tenant bought stock for $2,400 and got a discount on the rent. We could see our old building and the projects from the back window. 4 years later, my mom married Garland's father, Hayward Mack, a decent and quiet man with a southern drawl that tied him back to his South Carolina roots. He had been around for most of my life, but we never connected emotionally. He didn't treat me differently because I was his stepson. It just seemed he was at a loss for how to develop a relationship with me or even with his biological son when he re-entered our lives full time. My stepfather didn't care much for sports, so we couldn't bond while watching the Knicks on television or sharing hot dogs at Mets games at Shea Stadium. He always seemed to be working on cars, but he never pulled us under the hood with him for the kind of interaction that can bring a father and son together. He kept mostly to himself and played an auxiliary role, more like an uncle, transporting us where we needed to go and occasionally giving us money. He wasn't unkind, and I know at times he must have felt like an outsider who could never quite break into the tight triangle that was my mother, my brother, and I. 6 years into the marriage, Garland and I returned to the apartment after school one day and noticed that the VCR was missing from its spot underneath the television in the living room. We walked from room to room and discovered that in our parents' bedroom, someone had rifled the dresser drawers and left them open. We were sure we had been robbed. I called Mom as quickly as my fingers could press the numbers. When I told her what had happened, she started laughing. It seemed a strange response for a woman who had just learned she'd been ripped off. But she knew the truth. My stepfather had packed all of his stuff and left. Just like that, he was gone. All right, again, so if you enjoyed this book, and it's a really interesting one, has 3 different doctors who are going to share their stories of how they grew up and how they supported each other, please ask your ELA teacher. It's definitely worth your time. Have a great weekend.